In this video, I explain how CIOs can control the cost of IT using two main measures, IT budgeting and chargeback systems. IT budgeting is the process of allocating monetary resources to different IT projects and programs for a new year. Uh, as you can see on the right side, an example of an IT budget, uh, which includes um, two sections: a section on capital and a section on expenses. Capital expenditures are physical assets that will be used for more than 1 year. However, operating expenses are the cost that the company has to pay for them to be able to run on a daily basis. An example of a capital expenditure is, as you can see on the left side of this image, is the cost of development, the cost of infrastructure and networking, purchasing infrastructure and networking, hardware purchase and software purchase, and there is a specified money for that. That means the IT department cannot incur a cost higher than these numbers for in the next year. However, of course, they can incur a lower cost. IT budgeting is not enough to control the cost. We know that when a service is free, it is human nature to take, the service for granted. Uh, so we need to make the managers of different business units in the organization responsible for the IT costs that they incur. So as you can see here, Tilburg University has several schools, TISEM, TSHD, TLS, TSB. So if the IT system is for free, these managers they don't care about the cost of IT. So they just try to do whatever is required uh, and don't think about the IT costs. So a way that CIO can make these managers to these deans to be to use IT in an efficient way is having chargeback system. Um, it's a management practice of billing business departments, business schools, different schools for services provided by an in-house IT center. A CIO can achieve 7 objectives, using a chargeback system. First, uh, the CIO can figure out where a dollar uh, spent, on a service. So each product or service recovers its own cost, which means that each spent dollar or euro is associated with a service to a business unit. So if we bought, a computer for 100 euros, we can associate that, computer to a department at Tilburg University, for example, TISA. The second objective is resource allocation. The CIO can make sure that resources that are in short supply are allocated where they are really required. So, for example, during the peak and off-peak time periods, usually IT resources are more in needs. Therefore, the CIO can charge higher prices to make sure higher prices. They can charge the different business units higher prices to make sure that the resources are used, IT resources are used in the appropriate place. For example, assume that Canvas is, a quite an expensive resource, or Osiris is quite an expensive resource, and we can only accommodate 1,000 students per day. So what and if a school wants to use the resource on a specific date, which most of the school wants, then the IT department can say that your students can use Osiris for registration only if you pay 12,000 euros rather than the regular 5,000 euros for using Osiris. So this is, resource allocation is the second objective of, using a chargeback system. The third objective is, efficient utilization of IT resources. We want to make sure that a business unit does not waste money on unnecessary IT services. Uh, we want them to use the IT resources in a productive manner. So, if we charge the organization, the business units, the schools at university, sorry. So if we charge the schools at the university for, the computers, they don't just, go and try to order, as many computers as they can. They will be more cognizant of the expense. So again, CIOs can force departments to use the IT resources in an efficient manner. Of, Also, another objective can be having a kind of, performance evaluation for IT department. If we see that, the cost of a laptop is 1,500 euros uh, you know, by the IT department at the Tilburg University, but we can buy the same laptop, using 1,000 euros. This gives us, a kind of benchmark, uh, to figure out if the IT department is, being operated in a good manner, in an efficient manner. So, and then we can, make decision if we want to hire all these people in the IT department, or we can easily outsource, the service to another company. So one example was, the printing service at Tilburg University. Uh, After a while, we have found that, it's cheaper for the Tilburg University to outsource the printing service to another company, because the cost would be much lower in comparison to the IT department. The fifth objective of using a chargeback system is planning, helping with planning and budgeting. Uh, the requirements for IT comes from the business unit. So they can have better estimates about their future IT requirements, and thus their future IT expenses. So if we use a chargeback system, we are going to have better estimates in comparison to IT department being fully in charge of predicting the cost of IT and the demand for IT. The sixth objective is increasing user awareness and involvement. Uh, because business units have to pay for a service or resource, they will be more concerned about the provided IT service, so they will be more involved in in planning for information technology, in that will increase their IT literacy and help to have a digital organization. And finally, A chargeback system increases the awareness of IT staff. It motivates the uh, people who work in the IT departments to perform their work, uh, in a more cost-effective manner. But like any system, it has, an issue. Chargeback system has an issue, and that's that it creates, disputes between the IT department and business units. Before I explain different types of chargeback systems, let me introduce you to two types of non-chargeback system. The first type is unallocated cost. Costs are not allocated to a business units, but they deducted in full from organization's income. So if a computer is bought and uh, is being used at the university, we don't know this computer is the cost of this computer is incurred by which school. So it's just we just know that 100 euros is spent at the university level. So it is usually used in organizations with little or no experience in using information technology, and the disadvantage is that you cannot control the cost of IT. People are not held accountable for using information technology in an ineffective manner. The second type of non-chargeback systems are called simple cost allocation. You don't charge business units based on the actual service or product that they use, but based on their revenue, their earnings, their employee numbers, or their total cost. So these are not related, to the actual usage. So for example, we charge the IT department at Tilburg University can charge different schools based on the number of students or the number of faculties or the number of courses. The great thing about the advantage of this um, system is that it can be easily calculated. Accounting is not going to be difficult. However, this system is unfair to large business units that do not heavily use information technology. For example, we can have schools like theology, for example, that do not use information technology uh, as much as TISM, but uh, assume that it has more students. So they have to pay more, but they use IT less. So with that, we don't give enough incentives to the companies, to the schools, to different business units to lower their cost. Of course, there is no incentive for small business units to reduce their cost. And in reality, there is no true buyer-seller relationship that we see in chargeback systems. We can categorize chargeback systems based on two attributes. First, the charging or pricing can be either fixed or flexible. An IT department can have a fixed price for a service during a year, or it can have, a price that is being changed during a year based on cost, demand, market price, and so forth. The second attribute is the goal of chargeback systems. An IT department can try to just recover the cost to be able to associate a spent dollar or euro to a business unit, uh, or the goal of IT department can be to make profit. IT tries to uh, incur prices that can allow IT to be profitable for the services and products that it provides. First, I explained three types of cost centers, and then I explained the two types of profit centers. So we just learned that an IT department can just try to recover the cost. We call these IT departments cost centers then. So is the first type of chargeback system under cost centers uh, is uh, average cost pricing. So what happens is that at the end of an accounting period, which can be a quarter or a year, you calculate the total cost and then after that the average unit cost, and then you will see how much IT IT services were used by different departments, and then you uh, incur, you send the bill you send the bills to those business units. The great thing about the advantage of this um, system, this chargeback system, is that you can recover 100% of the cost, and it's easy to explain, implement, and audit. However, the issue is that from quarter to quarter, from accounting period to another accounting period, the price can change, drastically. We can have significant price fluctuation. And also, the real issue is that business units cannot easily do budgeting um, because the price are going to be changed. So it feels that business units cannot do anything. So at the end, the efficiency, the controlling of the cost that we want may not happen. And also, this is a poor method for scarce resources and system development costs. If we have, um, a scarce resource like what I mentioned about Osiris during registration uh, days, this methodology cannot uh, make Osiris, used efficiently. And the second chargeback system is, uh, you know, standard cost pricing. So the price is determined in advance of the use, not after the accounting period, but before the accounting period. You, as the IT department, you forecast the demand and also the cost, and then you divide the total cost by total demand, and you will come to a standard cost price. So the great thing about that is that there will be no periodic fluctuation. You do that for the entire year. So for the entire year, the uh, business units know what the prices are going to be. So business units can, budget more accurately, and there will be more consistency of, charging these business units. Uh, However, the disadvantage is that we need to have reliable forecast, uh, which usually is not a case. And uh, another issue is that we cannot assure that 100% of the costs are recovered with this approach. The third type of chargeback systems is flexible pricing. So uh, we charge higher rates for services in higher demands. So if a service is not in demand that much, we are going to charge lower. If it's during the registration days, we charge more for using Osiris. So the advantage of this flexible pricing is that you can easily control the demand for scarce resources, and you can even subsidize new technologies to encourage their use. However, the disadvantage is that this is very complex to administer, and it's not useful when all business units have a justifiable requirements. For example, in the case of Osiris, we know that all businesses, all the schools, they need registration it's not something that they can easily control themselves. So the issue is more a kind of a capacity problem rather than a charging problem. As mentioned earlier, IT department can be a profit center as well. That means they not just try to recover the cost, but to have profit margins by giving IT services and products. So we have two types of uh, profit centers, fixed pricing and market-based pricing. Both types, uh, in both types, the business units are free to, get the service inside from the IT department or from, an IT service provider outside the organization. Uh, but the IT department is not as free as business units. Some IT department can also provide services or products to organizations, other than the owning uh, organizations. In the fixed pricing, the two uh, parties, the IT department and the business units, they negotiate on a detailed contract which includes, prices, quality, delivery time, and so on and so forth. So, for example, uh, Tysem would uh, have a contract with the IT department about course registration. They would say that we are going to pay you 10 euros per student for all course registrations, and Osiris must be available 99.9% of the time. That means, for example, Osiris can be down for less than 8 hours per year. On the other hand, if you go with a market-based pricing, um, you would, as Tysem, you would look at the course registration service provided by the IT department, but you may go to the IT department of Eindhoven University, for example, and get, a price per student from them. Um, so this is the difference between the two systems. So the advantages of both systems is that, you know, um, IS is not viewed as, a cost center where, it's only cost. It can also become profitable and help the revenue of the company. The disadvantages is that, firstly, for fixed pricing, it's difficult if, the requirement changes. If, a maintenance is required that was not predicted before. Handling these changes in the contracts can be, difficult. There will be debates. So it's not easy to uh, resolve the issues. And in the case of market-based pricing, what is difficult is sometimes that that a business unit or an IT department cannot uh, give a market price because a market is not um, there is no market. You can get for example, course registration only from IT Osiris at the IT department of at the Tilburg University. You cannot go to other universities, so there is no market. So uh, or sometimes you see that there will be only two or three providers. So there is a kind of a monopoly here. So as a result, market price is difficult to find out. Pause here for a minute and try to answer this question and this question. Simply using a chargeback system doesn't mean that you can control the cost of IT or control the IT demand and allocate IT resources efficiently. A chargeback system can be easily ineffective if business unit managers do not use the related information and change their behavior as a result of the prices and the cost of IT. So how can we increase the use of chargeback information by business unit managers? How can we motivate them to use the cost incurred by IT in their decisions about IT usage? You need to increase three antecedents of uh, chargeback information use: involvement in budget preparation, accountability for meeting IT budgets, and cost variability of the charge. What does that mean? That means you can increase managers' use of chargeback information if you involve them in, developing a budget for the next year or for the next accounting period. They will use the chargeback information if they are held accountable using, for example, uh, evaluations that can make them to meet the IT budgets. And you also need to show these managers that the cost can change as a result of their decisions. So if you do these, if you increase these three antecedents, you will increase the use of chargeback information, and as a result, you can control the cost and demand uh, for IT. So my recommendation to Jim Barton, the CIO, is that uh, he should have an efficient chargeback system to decrease IT costs. And this happens only if the managers of different business units at IVK use the information provided by the chargeback system in their decisions. So how can I increase these three antecedents? To increase involvement, I would create an IT budget committee that includes all business unit managers, and then I will show them the IT budget that we have for the next year, and I would ask them to prioritize the IT expenditures. So involvement in the budgeting will help them to use the information from the chargeback uh, system. To increase the accountability, because I have great relationship with the CEO, I will ask William to add a point in their yearly performance evaluation, an item in their yearly performance evaluation, where they are asked if they meet the IT budget. And third, I will compare the cost of IT of a business unit with other business units in the department and the cost of that department in the last year. I will create a report of that, and then we'll send it to the business unit manager. So with that, I hope that I can increase chargeback information use and then control the cost of IT and the demand for IT. Pause here for a minute and try to answer this question. In the next video, I explain how Jim Barton, the CIO, can show the contribution of IT to revenue and profit of IVK.